Okay, wait. Okay. Okay. How about that? That should be better. That's green. Okay, cool. All right. So the deal is that there are going to be some school districts that get out before because they started NTI with those 2 snow weeks. Some districts apparently worked all the way through, right? There are going to be some that get out. But it looks like maybe I'm cutting out again. Look, it knows I'm having sound. My son's sitting behind me, the audio. Anyway, bottom line, we don't know what the last day you're going to do in class time. Well, I can just, guys, if you're having trouble hearing me, I can just do away with the headphone computer. Would that be better? Just go back to the way I did it. Okay, give me just a Okay. Can you guys hear me now? Yes, you can hear me? All right. All right. Cool. Thank you. Sorry for that. That's what happens when you try to upgrade your technology. Oh, snap. Now I can hear like a bunch of you as well. Okay. All right. So let's see. Look, you guys are helping one another out. I appreciate that. A Robin Krause clubhouse. I don't know about that. But I don't want to make a competing world history podcast. I love hers. I was listening to some more of her stuff yesterday. She did finally out of this community too, not gonna lie. Okay, so I lost my train of thought. Okay, right. So the anti-social studies, like part 1, I don't think I could come up with a better name than that. Part 2, she did actually get back to me, and she was stuff. I do not think she. I don't think she sent me a friend request, but that's okay. But it was still kind of cool. And I was listening just yesterday. I was listening to the episode where she talked about Cuba. You guys should have all listened to that one already. And one of the things that I loved was she said something to the effect of, this perspective is also true. And I thought that those two words together I might just be talking slowly. I'm thinking slowly today. So anyways, I liked the way that she said that another perspective was also true, because we tend, especially in our polarized society right now, we tend to come at things like one of the answers is right and the other answer must be wrong. It is very much possible that my experience can be true and you can have a different experience, and that experience can also be completely true, right? It doesn't have to just be one or the other. Okay, so does anybody have any housekeeping questions before we get down to talking about DBQs? I know that you can't wait to talk about DBQs, but any other housekeeping questions? When is the school year going to end? Not exactly sure. Today, we were told again, even more specifically than before, that we are literally supposed to be doing nothing in Infinite Campus besides entering attendance. And that is, I'm sure, frustrating to a lot of people, right? Because you guys just turned in a whole snot ton of stuff. Okay, so they are telling it to all the teachers. They didn't tell it to us at first. So I know a lot of teachers, especially for those first couple of weeks, sorry, I'm reading multiple questions at once. So they just last week told us not to enter anything. They had not said anything about anything beforehand. So I think that a lot of teachers, in some ways, kind of like me, just kind of continued with something that was as close to regular instruction as we can be and moving forward, okay? And now they're like, you never should have entered anything. And like, would have been nice if you told us that before it had been an entire month. And yeah, so right now, the way that they're trying to look at it, they still don't have it all ironed out. Like, I talked to the counselor at my son's today, and they still know. I did. Yes, lots and lots of people are still putting in grades. They only really communicated do not put grades in to us clearly last Wednesday or Thursday. But they've also communicated that nothing that we put in should be bringing your grade down. So, I mean, that's news for you, I guess, right? Although, like, then what happens if, like, I say turn in a page of notes and you turn in half a page of notes, right? Like, stands to reason if you had a good homework grade and then you start doing like only half of the homework, that your grade would go down. They have also told us that we should be keeping track of everything we're asking you to do, the stuff that they made us put on that template on the JCPS website and put due dates and stuff. We are also supposed to be keeping track of all those grades on paper so that we can do something with them eventually. Yeah, okay, so that's, would you? Well, you can stay. I'm not talking to you. You can stay. Okay, that's fine. You can stay, but you just need to stop interrupting me. Yeah, I was talking to my son. Sorry. So anyways, right, Samir, are you the one who never turns in any homework at all? I've got like 3 of you. Okay, great. I could go back at Infinite Campus and look. Anyhow, what I'm saying to you guys, only the 47 of you who are here on this call right now, is that if you're turning in the things that I asked you to turn in, right, which I said I'm not going to look at until tomorrow at the soonest, then that's probably not when I'm going to look at them, that your grades are going to be fine. What I see in front of me right now is I see a lot of people who are working quite hard. Okay, maybe some of you not to your fullest and maximum extent of how hard you possibly could work, but like y'all, there's a pandemic. You know, even if you're not worried about your grades and where you're going to go to college and how you're going to pay for it, what kind of job you're going to get, you're also like, is my grandparent going to survive this pandemic? Okay. And really, I feel like if you're at 78% power, 80% power, I don't really think that too many people are literally at their best right now. Okay. And if you are at your best right now, like I am so happy for you, but you are an outlier. Okay. The world is upside down. Yesterday, did you guys see oil was trading at negative $35 a barrel, or I'm sorry, oil futures. So yeah, like that was crazy, right? They're paying people because nobody has any place to store this oil. They were like, listen, we will give you $35 for every barrel of oil you take. It's just insane. Okay. And the stock market, you know, had a big crash, although now it seems to be doing all right, even though unemployment is what, at 15% or something like that? Katie, of course he was. Tupperware. You guys crack me up. Yes, it really was crazy. Like it was trading at $11 yesterday morning, and I was out in the garden, and Mr. Krause comes out, and he's like, "You need to come in." He was like, "Ahmed," he sounded pretty freaked out. He's like, "You need to come inside and see this." But he was like, "Oil is trading for like negative $35 a barrel," and I was like, "You can just tell me." And then I came inside and I did take a picture of it because I thought, well, that is definitely worth documenting. So, I mean, Danny, I don't know that there's going to be a food shortage, but there's a chance that the food won't be where we need for it to be, right? Like that's what normally happens during famines, is that it's not that there isn't enough food, it's just not in the place where the people who don't have any food happen to be. So, your neighborhood doesn't allow gardens? You could do container gardening. Get some 5-gallon buckets and put some dirt in there. Getting a big old dirt delivery tomorrow. I have half an acre and somehow we still have to buy dirt. I love basil, definitely growing. Oh my gosh, you have rye, everybody? Esther's got rye in her backyard. If things go south, everybody meet at Esther's house. I swear I don't have a garden. No, I literally just bought a bunch of like gourds and pumpkin seeds and stuff. So the cool thing about community is, yes, Will. The cool thing about community, though, is that a bunch of people just volunteered that they have different things. Like, you have a community, there's a time of difficulty, you know, you partner in trade, and then like, magically everybody can have more than they would have had alone. Oh, wait, that's macro. Okay. You have too much milk. Oh, Liam, if you think that's bad, you do not want to know how much ground beef we have. It's crazy. All right. You can freeze the milk, actually. I froze milk. Pour off a few ounces out of the top, and then you can put it in the freezer if it fits. We're drinking milk that was previously frozen. So, and it's not even that bad. The granola I had today was pretty stale. Okay, so let's talk about DBQs, right? Because we are all dying to talk about DBQs, and at least half the people who are not typing are like, seriously, would you shut up about stupid stuff? It's been 20 minutes. It's Tuesday everywhere in the world today, Sushruth. Okay, so DBQ, go ahead and look at your Google Classroom. I posted some documents and I asked you to watch a video before you showed up in here. So I'm going to do a question. You can do thumbs up or thumbs down. All right, so the question is, who watched the Steve Heimler DBQ video? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Okay, yeah, it is Wednesday in Beijing, but you know what? That's not today. That's tomorrow. Well, Sushruth said that it's Tuesday somewhere in the world today. And every place that it is today, it is Tuesday. Okay. All right. Time is a construct and time is not a constant. All right. So let's talk about this DBQ thing. A bunch of you said you watched the Steve Heimler thing. A few of you were willing to cop that you did not, and like 20 of you did not respond at all. I assume means that you did. Okay. So let's talk about the rubric, okay? I'm going to pull up the rubric on my computer. You should pull up the rubric on your computer. In fact, if you have the capacity to print, you should print the rubric. You don't have to print it right now, but you should print it. You should sleep with it under your pillow so it will enter your brain through osmosis, and then you should have it right next to you while you are writing the DBQ, which for funsies this year you can actually do, right? Like they said in the notes, you can have whatever you want on your desk, and next week we'll talk about maybe what you should have on your desk while you are writing. But let's look at the rubric. We talked about it a little bit last week. It's the link. It looks like on Google Classroom, it's the top right one. It's the only one that says link AP Central. So we've been over this before, but we're going to go over it quickly again because the more times that you do, the better you're going to understand it. And can one of you tell your father that? Okay, sorry. Not you people in class. That was for my own personal children. Okay, so your thesis. I was super excited. I hadn't watched the Hal Heimler DBQ thing before, even though it's been out there for a while. I mean, he changed it for this year for 2020, but I was super excited because I've never seen it before, but he and I have a lot of similar ideas about how to go ahead and teach this content. I especially loved his thesis formula because it is effectively the same formula that I have asked you to use. So it says, okay, for the thesis, it says responds to the prompt with a historically defensible thesis or claim that establishes a line of reasoning. We're going to practice this skill, but you guys can manage that. Next, contextualization describes a broader historical context relevant to the prompt. So I learned something new from Mr. Heimler, which is that he personally, at least, has never seen an essay get a point that didn't talk about the context prior to the prompt. Right? There are two other ways you can do it. You can talk about things that are ongoing simultaneously, or you can talk about things that happened afterwards. It is hard for me to I'm a little too linear in terms of being a historian to understand how you can establish context by talking about something that had not yet happened. I wouldn't recommend that. Talking about what happened before and during, maybe if you hit both of those, that's a fantastic strategy. I'm going back to my Discord screen right now. Tell me what questions you have. September 1752. Is it not Tuesday on a Tuesday there? Is that the purpose of that? Or oh, we skipped from 2 to 14? Is that how we got the difference between the Julian and the Gregorian calendar? Is that when that happened? Also, Michael, how do you even have that Okay, cool. See, look, I didn't even know that, and I guessed correctly. Fantastic. I had a dream. I was on a quick recall team, and I was happy. Okay, so do we have any questions about the thesis or the context point? Okay, yes, so well, the context can be anywhere in the world, but you should establish the relationship between the context, right? I mean, it isn't just, hey, let's list, say that your question is about the Industrial Revolution. You could say previously in Europe, Johannes Kepler discovered that orbits of planets were elliptical. I mean, yes, that did happen first, but that would really not be a relevant context for the Industrial Revolution. Does that make sense? So, Otis, I don't think you're going to get a whole lot that are going to score above a 9. I will try to get my hands on some of that, but I still think you're looking at a paragraph for your context in your thesis. That's paragraph 1. And I think you're looking at 2 big body paragraphs because you're ideally going to want to group the documents into 2 separate groups. And then those paragraphs are probably going to be, I mean, if you were handwriting them, probably 2/3 of a page each. And yeah, and that's the other thing with lengths, like this is going to be weird, guys. You're going to actually, like, how many of you, writing a question, how many of you are planning on typing your DBQ? The other option is handwriting it, photographing it, and uploading it. So how many of you are planning on typing your DBQ? And then another question. I take it, Otis, that's you with the pen. How do you? How have I suddenly forgotten how to spell access? So how many of you have access to a printer at home? Thumbs up if you do, thumbs down if you do not. Okay, so Liam, that is probably too detailed. Okay. Unless that is like somehow so that's good for facts, but I just have a hard time imagining a situation where that much detail would be helpful. Okay, so Danny, if you can't type, then write it and take pictures. Just make sure that you understand how to take pictures. Okay, so that's 39. So most of you then have access to a printer at home. Okay, so here's the deal. You are not allowed to print the documents out beforehand. Once your time window opens, you could print them. Now, since you only have 45 minutes, if you cannot print them instantly and your printer is not fast, that might not be to your benefit. Something that World War I's not going to be on it. So the time periods, so covered time periods will be 1200 to 1900, right? So that's what's going to happen there. Okay, so the deal is, I guess if you have a desk put up and your printer is downstairs, I would suggest that you set yourself up someplace that you are comfortable. If you want to print the documents, that you sit near the printer so that you can print them and access them pretty much immediately. But yes, and if your printer has a mind of its own and it may or may not print depending on how it's that day, I would just plan on not using it. Oh, Liam, that is a good question. Maybe you could just print 2 copies? And then like your mom could run them back and forth real quick? I'm not sure. I mean, ideally, you will not be writing your essays, Liam and Katie, in the same room. Okay, so if you want to print out the documents so you can annotate. Obviously, whether you like annotating or not, I have made you annotate the hell out of everything this year, so you should be pretty good at it, and it should feel pretty comfortable to you. What you can do if you do not intend to use the printer is you can look online, and I will try to find some. Lots of different teachers have made graphic organizers where, you know, you jot down an idea for your thesis and you jot down some words to remind you of what you want for your context, and then you give, you know, for each document, you jot down some notes on it. You know, what's the main idea? What would you say to source it? Could you integrate outside evidence here? Okay, so I'll try to give you some examples of that. Depending on what kind of writer you are, yes, Heimler does have a graphic organizer, and there are a bunch of other ones. Okay, so you can print the documents if you have access to a printer. A lot of teachers are pretty mad about that because there's an equity thing, right? If your family cannot afford ink, if your family had a printer but you haven't been able to afford to replace it, that puts you at something of a disadvantage, which is why a lot of teachers have made these graphic organizers. So questioning about the scores. So teachers like to speculate about these things, although the very first thing that everybody speculating says is we can't really ever know the answer to this question. So the thought is that a 5 would definitely, like a 9 or a 10 would definitely be a 5, maybe an 8. There's some discussion about whether or not a 5 or a 4 would get you a 3, or if you'd actually have to have a 6. And here's the thing, guys, right? As much as they swear, and I've said this many times, as much as they swear that they don't decide what percentage of students is going to get each grade, it pretty much comes out looking like a bell curve every single year. It's always curved, Liam. Like they, you know, for one, like say that we always had a 10-point question. For 1 year, it might be a 9 or gets you a 5, or, you know, gets you the maximum points that you can possibly get for that. A different year, if the question's harder, it might be a big deal if somebody gets a 7. So it's all curved. Now here's the thing, and here's why you should really just focus on doing your own best work every single time. A lot of times, well, there are all kinds of things that impact who's going to take the AP test, right? Like some schools require you to pay for it and you have to take it if you take the class. Other schools don't require that you pay for it until February, so people who think that they're not likely to pass can kind of dip out. There's the thing where Florida made most people take the, you know, where they made most people take the APHG test. So if lots of people who are not likely to be very successful take the test, then the average score for passing is going to be lower than if lots of really, really, really smart people take the test. Or not even smart's not really the right word. Lots of people who are well prepared to take this particular exam, right? Because you can be perfectly smart, but if you don't know about world history, then you're probably not going to do great on this test, right? Smart isn't the fact. Knowing the world history facts and being familiar with how to show evidence of the required skills, yeah, thanks, Angela, is really the thing that they're measuring, okay? So questions about that? Okay, well, I have a question. I've noticed that now on my Voice Connected, there's a screen with a little arrow that says go live. Can we like now meet on Discord like you can on Zoom? I'm not sure that we should, but, oh, is that just sharing my screen? That's not actually video? Okay, cool. Okay, well, I think that I don't need to share my screen because I sent you all of the stuff. Okay, so Sam, that is a great question. What about this DBQ? All right, we can talk about video chat later, but okay, but only on desktop. Okay, so this DBQ, so we're going to work on this DBQ here on this call, and then I'm going to ask you to write this DBQ and another one before you come to your small group meetings. Now, I counted today, and if I was able to count correctly, if I counted correctly, I think 57 of you have signed up for small groups. So that is definitely more people than we currently have on the call right now. And I was actually really impressed that hopefully you have all seen that there is now a chat for each of the small groups so that you can talk to one another. And I mean, yeah, you can talk to one another. You can share your thoughts. That's where we are going to meet to do our voice calls. All the voice calls are going to be on Wednesdays and Thursdays to talk about the DBQs. I'm going to ask you to write this DBQ, and then I'm going to post another one so that we'll have two different things to discuss, because you're going to have already worked through part of this one, so that we'll have stuff to discuss. And that might be, maybe in the small groups, that might be a place where we want to discuss video chat. So maybe people from each individual group can go in and decide whether or not video chatting feels right for them in that particular group. We can have a small amount of democracy. But in any case, I was really proud. So many people went to the spreadsheet, signed up, made some interesting choices. I was also super amused that many of you signed up for the same people to sit at the tables with. So I thought that was kind of funny as well. But that does at least solidify my belief that allowing people to choose their own seats actually has some benefit. Okay, it's the only people you know. Okay, fine. I suppose that's true. Whatever. Oh. But guys, stop. So yes, Amelia, unless you are the group that decided you wanted to meet on Fridays, that I am like no group for Fridays, and it said, please don't make any more groups. A group made a Friday group, and they're trying to meet at 3 o'clock on Fridays. I cannot promise that I'm going to be available at 3 o'clock on a Friday. I really would. Yes, that group. Also the group where I had to, like literally in the instructions, it says, don't screw around. We have like multiple pages for people to say irrelevant things, don't screw around on the group pages. And we had people like really write something irritating on every single group. Oh, be nice. We're not calling people fools. I mean, or at least if we want to call people fools, we need to find some historical people to apply that term to. Yes, I know it was. Okay, but yes, Samir, it's your group. Okay, so I've got 6 groups, which means I am meeting with a group at 10 o'clock on Wednesday, 12 o'clock on Wednesday, 2 o'clock on Wednesday, 10 o'clock on Thursday, 12 o'clock on Thursday, and 2 o'clock on Thursday. Literally, Mr. Krause is over here, and he's like, why are you doing that? Literally because I care. That's why I'm doing it. So if you are the group that signed up for 3 o'clock on Friday, why don't you maybe find one of those other times and sign yourselves up for that too? And then you can have your own call without me at 3 o'clock on Friday. You know, like, I really don't want to add a 7th meeting. I really don't. Particularly because this means I'm going to be, well, I can't commit to 1 o'clock on Friday, but I teach another class at 11. Yes, and partly I would like to keep the times that I have to go live on the computer to, I like that class just fine. I would like to keep my AP World to Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So, I mean, you guys can still have your own group. You don't even all have to be in the same DBQ group. Like, there are plenty of spots. You guys can find that. You can figure something out. Oh, my human geo class is so not interesting right now. Last class I shared a documentary. Okay, so back to the rubric. Hurry up. Let's. Okay. So hustle it up, and then we're getting back to the room. Yes, it was very impressive. Oh, I feel like the non-appreciation would probably go both ways there. I feel like you would feel very frustrated in that class. Okay, so back to the rubric. All right, so evidence. Again, you can get 5 points for evidence, guys. Like, you can totally do this. Like, you should be able to rock this out. Okay, so evidence from the document. You can get 3 points for this. You use the content of 2 documents to address the prompt. That's the low bar. Yes, you can do that. If you do not get that point, I will cry. On the rubric, it says there's an intermediate point, which I think is actually pretty fantastic. Supports an argument in response to the prompt using 2 documents. So you can get those 2 points with the same sentences as long as your sentences also support your argument. And then the last one is if you manage to support your argument with 4 documents, which I totally think you can. Okay? I totally think you can. Then evidence beyond the documents, usually you only get 1 chance to show that you know things beyond the documents. Now you get things that you know beyond the documents, and you get to have notes next to you. So if you at least maybe make a list of historical events from each century that you know about, like say that you have a timeline next to you, that might be able to jog your memory. Okay, sorry, there's a cat in a box laying next to you. Now is not a good time. Okay, so you can put in 2 different pieces of historical evidence, but be aware that it absolutely has to support your thesis, right? So if your thesis is that the patriarchy has made it far more difficult for women to rise to and be successful in the highest roles of leadership, then you need specific evidence that supports that. You can't be like, also Napoleon was a weirdo who was greedy and didn't know when to quit. Right? Like, yes, that is historical evidence. He seems to have been greedy. He didn't need to invade Russia, but he chose to, and that ended up being his ultimate downfall. All of that is historically true, but it has nothing to do with the patriarchy has made it difficult for women to ascend to and be successful at the highest levels of leadership throughout world history. Does that make sense? So all of the things that you do should be supporting that argument that you made up in the first paragraph. All right. Analysis and reasoning. So the one at the bottom there, so this is on page 2, the one at the bottom, that's the one that even Heimler talked about and was like, yeah. So you can think about analyzing multiple variables and being nuanced and making insightful and relevant connections across and within timeframes. That's great, but like there are 9 other points that are easier to get. So, but like if you get a double, then maybe be happy because that puts you in scoring position. That makes sense. Okay, so then for the analysis, for one document, explains how or why the document's point of view, purpose, historical situation, and or audience relevant to an argument. So this is the sourcing point. And here's what's kind of fun about this. Used to be, and for other years, like for you in APUSH next year, will be that you are going to have to source 3 documents to earn 1 sourcing point. Now, you source 1 document and you get 1 point. And if you source 2 documents correctly and use them to support your argument, you can get a 2nd sourcing point. So that is way huge. That's a big deal. And I recommend, like how many, just take a guess, how many documents do you think I'm going to say that you should source? So how on earth could you possibly source 6 when there are only 5? So yeah, Luke, I think that that's a good idea. And if you use a counter argument, so in spite of A, defensible historical statement was caused by B and C, then you can you will be well set up to have an argument that is nuanced throughout. Yeah, and then if you have the time to write the conclusion and make it all beautiful, fantastic. Go for it that way. Okay, so you really should source at least 3 of them, right? You really should source at least 3 documents. And no, Olivia, there's not 2 context points. There's 2 outside evidence points, right? But that really means you're using outside evidence 3 times because you do have outside evidence in your context, but you'll get the context point for that, not the other one. So you really can get that for outside evidence effectively 3 different times. It's just called something different. Okay, so questions about the Sweet. So let's go ahead now, take a look at the documents. You may have read them before, you may not have. I'm going to be quiet for a couple of minutes so that you guys can read the documents that are titled Copy of Decolonization Documents. It should not take you all of that long to read them because they're fairly short. If you did happen to listen to the podcast that deals with this thing in history, then you should be pretty well equipped to understand this. I can see it looks like a lot of you are already into the document, so that's perfect. Go ahead and read those. I'm going to shut up for the next 2 or 3 minutes so that you can actually think about them as you are reading. I'm not muted. All right, so you should probably be done by now, at least as far as reading the document. So when we look over our essays in the small groups, we'll have an opportunity to actually unmute ourselves and share. I think that's a little unwieldy with 50 people on here. So I would like you to now take a moment and write a context statement. If you have another document open, you can just go ahead and do it in the other document. If you turn out to like it, then you can just copy and paste it into here if you think you have a context statement that is good. And I can give, feedback on a few statements so that everybody can see maybe what we're doing right and where we can still add and develop to make it a stronger context statement. Okay. So right now you're done reading and you are typing or handwriting a context statement related to this essay responding to this prompt. All right, so sweet. I see one person is typing. Oh, well, that's not a context statement, but that is a cat. So if you have a context statement that you think is moderately okay, please go ahead and copy and paste that or type that in here so we have some context statements to discuss. And this cat is named Spot, in case you... Yeah, they can. All right, so bye, Samir. We'll see you later. All right, so let's think, if you're done yet, you can go ahead and read Liam's statement. So Liam, I think that your statement would actually be a little stronger if you focused on what was happening in Europe about how the war had devastated them, how it it impacted them financially, which I assume is what you mean by support, and that it did become more difficult for them to justify their colonial holdings. I would probably give this the point, but I think that you would do well to focus maybe more on the rise of nationalism and the desire for determination, coupled with what Europeans were experiencing and how they really weren't in a position to continue to have this kind of dominance. Yeah, I think that would make it somewhat better. If anybody else has a suggestion, you can go ahead and type that now. And then thank you, Olivia, for being willing to share. Olivia, I really, really love your first two sentences. It was helpful for the United States, although I kind of doubt that particular portion of the sentence is going to end up helping your thesis. You're probably not going to talk too much about the U.S. But I do think that the decrease was given to the colony states, like a certain confidence, and they absolutely had grown restless. I really, really, really think that it would be to everybody's benefit to mention the word nationalism, right? Like if you have a chance to write everybody's going to have a chance to write a context statement, but when you write a context statement, I would try to do some name dropping of really big, obvious vocab words like nationalism, like desire for political self-determination, stuff like that. Okay, yes, so Vietnam was French, and you're right, one of the not from Africa, so it would be fantastic to look into that. Hopefully, I see Ella is typing. Hopefully, Ella, you are giving us maybe one more context statement. I'd love to get maybe one more beyond that as well, and then we'll have a chance to write thesis statements. Yeah, actually, so Ella, that's a great question. You absolutely could talk about how they fought for the mother countries in World War II, and it would be even better if you can talk about how they caught some nationalism from that, and a lot of the soldiers from the colonies were like, wait, so you're telling us that it was wrong for Germany to invade Poland and try to steal their resources, and we should like destroy their country because they did that? Like, didn't you invade our country and steal our resources? You know, a little bit. So that would be a fantastic thing to talk about in terms of context. Are there any other big ideas that you think would make sense to put in context? Maybe you don't feel like typing out your whole statement or whatever, but like any other ideas that you think would be central to understanding the context of these documents? I haven't read Luke's thing yet, but I can also think of at least maybe one more thing that would be relevant for the context that I considered when I was reading the docs. So Luke, I think that's pretty fantastic. I think that's a nice one. And Liam, I think your second attempt was much better. Okay, so rise of communism, I do think that's relevant. Remember that really truly saw the rise of communism at the very beginning of the 20th century, right? And then by 1917, we got to the Second Russian Revolution, the communist one. So that one was, I mean, that is a thing that happened in the 50, 60 years before this. And Luke, I appreciate your honesty. I think the other thing that probably is really relevant, right? One of those documents comes from the United Nations itself. The thing that you could talk about is, as it relates to nationalism and the desire for independence amongst the colonies, is in general the rise and then the dominance of the concept of nation state. You get that. I mean, when you have something that's called the United Nations, right? It's not called the United Kingdoms. It's not called the United. Well, there was the United Kingdom. It's not called the United Empires. It's called the United Nations. So this idea that political entities exist to serve the dominant group of people who live within those political boundaries is very much relevant to this, because the colonized powers are completely lacking this thing that's been totally normalized in the rest of the world, right? Like, and definitely World War II is very relevant because they had a chance in some cases to travel and see this in other parts of the world and to really notice, wow, that's very nice for the people who have it and really not so nice for us. Okay, so let's take a little time now that we've had some time to read the documents and to ponder some of these ideas, and let's go ahead and write a thesis statement. So let's take a look, because what we've talked about as being relevant for context is not necessarily the stuff that is going to be most relevant for responding to the question posed by the prompt. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's see, where did my document? Okay, so the prompt itself: to what extent to end colonization, European altruism after World War II. And remember that when we get these to what extent prompts, you're going to evaluate. So to a large extent, small extent, to a moderate extent, you might be able to get away without using the word extent, perhaps, but probably, you're definitely going to talk about the size of the impact of the item in question, right? And now, which historical thinking skill is this using? Remember, your choices of historical thinking skill that are going to be tested specifically are going to be comparison, causation, and change in continuity over time. So which one of those will be tested the most by this question? So your choices are compare and contrast, causation, and change or continuity over time. Or change or continuity over time. Correct. So if you were thinking in your head that this is probably a causation question, you are absolutely 100% correct. And you can tell because it is decision, blah, 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 based on blank. Okay, so was the cause altruism? Was the cause that the Europeans were like, wow, we really don't want to be selfish and we are concerned how other people are impacted by our actions and make sure to maximize the well-being of those other people? Excuse me. So this is going to be a causation question, which should maybe help you formulate some kind of thesis, because I have a hard time imagining, right? You want to say to what extent was the decision based on European altruism, but if you suggest that maybe that was not the primary motivation, you probably will need to suggest something else that caused the end of colonization that wasn't altruism. Okay, so I'm going to mute myself. I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to give you guys a chance to come up with a thesis statement and read the ones that have been posted so far. Okay. Okay, so let's think about this because, well, I think, Mihir, and this is not a criticism specifically of you because a lot of you said this. It's a describe the extent to which, but in this case, like my personal opinion is that the extent to which altruism was a motivating factor nearly negligible. Like, does that make sense? I think that if I had to put a percentage on colonies go was because the Europeans were like, wow, we screwed up. Those other people should have been independent the whole time, and now we care about their well-being. Like, I think that is someplace between 2 and 5% of the overall motivation. So, Liam, that might be a good example of outside evidence, depending on how you use it. I think that we are tempted to give some credence to what the prompt says, but if altruism really wasn't a factor, right? And again, Mihir, this is not just pertaining to yours. There were at least 2 others that I read that have this. Correct. It might be that you need to write an essay, not you personally, but like, a student needs to write an essay that says it was to a minimal extent because that wasn't motivation at all. So there is that, and that could potentially be a counter argument. Although there were various peoples and groups that were pushing for decolonization, very few of those groups really were doing it for altruistic reasons, right? Like the only group that I can think of broadly that was against colonization were the communists, and they're philosophically against colonization, right? They don't think that some people should, and it's not, they don't think that some people should work hard and other different people who didn't work that hard should get the benefit of the labor of the people who worked really hard, right? So they've got that philosophical idea where they don't want to see colonization. But by the time decolonization comes around, any communist support of that really isn't at all altruistic anymore, right? Like they're all thinking if we can get this country out from the Western Europeans, perhaps they can become an ally to us. Perhaps those supplies can accrue to us instead of the Western Europeans. So that's just something to think about, is that they might suggest a motivation that is nearly negligible. And you might have to be able, like that might be your outside evidence of, if you know of one, an anti-colonial league or an individual who made anti-colonial speeches, for instance. But I can't, like off the top of my head, I can't think of a single major European leader or politician or even the name of a single group that made a big deal about trying to free the colonies. And like I said, that's why I asked if you can think of somebody, if somebody knows the name of somebody who passionately advocated for that, great. But, even though that might make a more convenient argument while you're doing this, you definitely don't have time to like go look up somebody who espoused that viewpoint. You might just have to say that was pretty minimal. There were 3 much bigger concerns to the Europeans. And Angela, I like yours. You might want to extend a little bit on that to a thought for the colony, to a thought the colonies wanting independence would have been more detrimental. You might just want to say why. Or it was too expensive. Cost benefit analysis just really isn't there. Yes, Esther, probably 10 minutes. So, and I posted a couple of other documents there, but probably about 10 minutes is what you'll want to spend writing your, probably 10 minutes to write first paragraph, and then that's about 25 minutes for your analysis of 5 of those documents. I read some teachers who actually have sat down and tried to write one of these five document DBQs in the allotted time, and they're finishing with maybe a minute or 2 to spare. So, I mean, but keep in mind that maybe sometimes being the teacher actually isn't an advantage because there's just too much information. If you only know 4 facts about something, then you can just go ahead and put all 4 facts in. If you know 20 facts about something, you might agonize over which ones to pick. No, but also given, like they took, okay, guys, I didn't tell you that to freak you out. They also scored, like being honest and severe, they scored themselves, those 2 people, at an 8 and a 9, right? So those were really good essays. So if you know 1 fact total, do your best to write your context statement with facts you know from some other time period that are at least moderately relevant. Write a good thesis statement. Trickier if you don't know facts, but like maybe you could still do it. And then you can still talk about and analyze the documents, right? There's a lot of stuff in the documents. So if you don't know stuff for outside evidence, well, okay. But you still know how to do those skills. You still know how to analyze the documents, right? You can tell if something's written by a prince and it's defending the position of the crown, you know that that's going to have a significantly different flavor than if something is written by, I don't know, a freedom fighter criticizing the crown. You can really still do a lot with that. Okay, if you don't know much outside evidence, could you use events from other time periods? You could. That would be maybe your second best option. Like, the better option for this particular question for outside evidence is if you talk about, say, it would be really nice if for this, so this is the UN, Ho Chi Minh, Nkrumah, Kenyatta, and Fidel Castro. Oh, right, so that's also Latin American as well. So if you were able to talk about, trying to think of another colony. If you were able to talk about Indian independence, right? If you were able to say something about the way that Gandhi persuaded the British, right? You could mention the hunger strike. You could mention that, so that would be even conceivably, you have to be careful, but you could even conceivably use Gandhi, but not specifically be an example of India, but you can talk about how radical factions within various groups advocating for freedom and independence had different goals, and that those goals sometimes led to the assassination or removal, but maybe more importantly, assassination of leaders who were looking to build consensus. And talk about the consequences of that factionalism. Maybe that would work as another example of outside evidence. So then the question that I'm more directly trying to answer has to do with events from other time periods. So in this case, maybe as we're looking at altruism as a role in ending colonization, you could maybe point to the American Revolution, or, well, maybe not so much the Haitian Revolution, that would be an argument, but you could point to the American Revolution. For ages, altruism was not the motivation, right? Like the British weren't like, wow, we raised up such a wonderful child full of colonists that we want them to grow and experience life on their own. You know, like obviously that wasn't an altruistic decision. Just like in the case of many of the colonies that were decolonized in the 20th century, the British wanted to hang on to the United States. And it was only when the cost of the war became so high and, you know, the death tolls were significantly high that the war comes to an end, right? Like you could have conceivably, if the British had been willing to spend more time and more lives, the conflict potentially could have continued. So I think that that would be an example, Angela. Was that Angela who asked that question? No, Shrita, sorry. Of using an event from another time period to illustrate the point of your thesis, which is that it's never altruism, it's always greed. Does that make sense? No, I don't think the Europeans tried to hide their knowledge. Me here, I know, I'm so sorry. Like I've literally been that, you know, every day we talk about things that we're like, and humanity sucks again. Oh, we're jerks. I mean, but we do good things too. We really do, right? I mean, we learn how to test for virus antibodies, and we try to improve the tests we have when they're not very good. Can you what now? My daughter would like to say hello. Here she comes. Hello. Olivia says hi back. Oh, thanks. That's like 3/4 of my lifetime, yo. Like I did not spend 3/4 of my life studying genocide. So let's see. And then Liam and Jonathan and Sushruth and Danny and Otis and Angela and Molly all say hi as well. No, test as an antibody test. And like while some people are setting up fake testing clinics and charging people money and scamming them, right? Like, well, that's definitely a thing that's happening. Lots of people are donating to food banks, and lots of people are donating, and lots of other school staff are trying to reach out to kids who aren't responding to any of their teachers, not because they're like, oh my gosh, son, work. They're reaching out because they're like, just want to make sure that you're like physically okay, right? So it's all this different stuff. So that one was my daughter. Yeah, my son's downstairs right now. Who knows what he's doing? Probably playing Fortnite. She's right. Okay, so yes, you can use events from other time periods, but like the outside evidence doesn't count unless it supports your thesis. But of course, there are plenty of examples from other time periods. You know, so this was talking about decolonization. You could go back to the Berlin Conference and be like, ha, also greed and not altruism, right? If that's your thesis, also like greed, not altruism, there are many, many historical events that didn't happen during the immediate time frame you can refer to for outside evidence, particularly if your argument contains it was never about doing what was right for the other people, and it was always about greed. Okay, what are some other examples of outside evidence you think you to support the thesis that you wrote, right? Like, you all should have written some thesis statements. What kinds of outside evidence would you use to support the thesis that you write? Okay, the Geneva Conference? Sure. Okay, Algeria, yeah. And while you guys are typing this, I want to look back at the Fidel Castro question. And review that document so I can answer that. How would we use Fidel Castro? So in this case, Fidel Castro, even though, right, like we know after the fact that he became a dictator, that's maybe you could use that as some outside evidence, although I'm not sure how you could make that support your thesis, that this idea of struggle, people who want the better, more dignified, more just nation, right, that's nationalism. So you could put that with other documents that have a nationalist flair, right? So and I mean, that might be a different thing. If nationalism features in your thesis, then you might want to look at which documents had nationalist intent and how did the Europeans respond to that? They respond to that with respect, at least. I mean, maybe eventually. But again, we know that there were different European responses in some cases, more so in my England and France were like, well, okay, you're getting expensive and you want some self-determination and maybe we can try to leave. You don't have to pay to control you, but we can still get the money from your region. We can still screw you over, even without having a colony. Because that happened. Right, so document 2 is nationalist. Document 3 is nationalist. Document 5 is clearly nationalist. Document 4 also is, but right, that's a little more militant. So another way maybe you could split the documents is you could see sort of which ones are advocating for, I mean, you could split them by region, you could split them by who they were trying to get their independence and try to else. Which ones are pure nationalist and which ones are actually advocating the revolution? I mean, I guess for me personally, it would be harder to write an essay this way. I would probably look at document 1 by itself and then explore the other 4 documents. And maybe I would do that all in one paragraph. Maybe I would, because clearly the one from the UN stands apart as not having been written by the leader or future leader of a country. Does that make sense? And then the cool thing is you could transition to between the paragraphs and continue that analysis and say, you know, the United Nations merely reflect all of these other things that were being said in, let's say, 45 and 53, and then you have 2 other documents from the 60s. So maybe that's another way that you can, okay? And I think Heimler does a really nice job of explaining the value of grouping the documents, because otherwise you really do fall into that trap of document 1 says, document 2 says. Okay, so over here, Gandhi in India and Algeria, Angola's war for independence. I mean, and that went on for a really long time. True, you could even, you could bring in national contributing to the rise of in Europe to start with. Okay, I'm going to type a question here. Okay, so the question is, would you now feel ready to write a DBQ using the new rule on this topic? So that's a yes or no. And if your answer is no, what more could be done to help you make you feel comfortable with that? I mean, to the extent that anybody is ever ready to write a DBQ, right? Same, and maybe learn more outside evidence. That's what we've been doing all year. Okay. I'm making a list of of things you guys are asking for. Practice examples. Sourcing. Okay, grouping. Okay, for the question up above, would you now feel ready to write it? Kind of like, eh? Is there anybody who's like legit thumbs down? I realize that it says your name, so if you put a thumbs down, other people can see that you said you're really not ready. But like, if you don't feel like you're at least part way through the process, that would be helpful information for me to have. Right. Well, and as it turns out, if in response to what Sushruth said, you may, if you kept your stuff in the order that I gave it to you, literally may already have a binder of side sources, right? I mean, I've given you secondary sources and I've given you primary sources, given you graphic organizers to think about all of those things. But again, you're probably not going to have time. I mean, like, you might be able to flip to the section in your binder, but like, how long through a binder? Look on Google, 3 minutes max. You really don't have a ton of time. So you definitely want to be doing some review and studying. To answer Ella's question, are you supposed to source while you explain how it supports your thesis? Yes. And for documents like the ones here, knowing that, Ho Chi Minh really put his money where his mouth was, right? Like he really stuck. He fought on those principles. So you can talk about how this was a person who was unbelievably committed to that rightful self-determination and was not willing to let it go. You can consider who's the intended audience, like the fact that Fidel Castro was looking to overthrow a dictator, that he's not wanting to sort of live under the thumb of another country or another system or someplace where they're not free to pursue their own self-determination. So absolutely. And something I think a lot of students think that sourcing is like this separate thing, but really examining what the source and the context and the purpose of a document is, that literally is the outside. Okay, so quick thought, Liam, I haven't even read all of that yet, but unless there is, like, this is for this question, that is probably too much outside evidence. Like, you're probably going to want to max outside evidence, like, sentence of, this is another thing that was similar, and then another sentence that explains kind of how the two events are connected, and then a third sentence that explains how this example supports your thesis. Like, they are definitely not looking for whole paragraphs on outside. Sorry, but okay, so let's think a little bit about going forward. I'm going to ask you to finish this DBQ, and I'm going to post another one. So I'm going to ask you to show up at your small group sessions with 2 DBQs already written. And I've got here on my list that we want practice, so I've just assigned you practice. I will also, if you do not, and I'll put it this way, if you do not show up at one of those small group sessions, your DBQs will have to be submitted by Friday. Okay, if you show up then and participate in the discussion, then you do not have to submit them to me by Friday or ever. You will get credit for the participation. But if you are unable / unwilling to show up, then it is an assignment that is going to due on. Okay. So I will come back to your group. You guys can stay on when the call is coming to an end, which will be fairly soon. So the topics that I have, and what group are you guys? The Achaemenids? Yeah, Achaemenids, we'll come back to you. Mr. Krause finds that name. Well, okay, the other ones are Squad, Bernie, Roman Empire, Rasputin, Bonaparte, and Bernie aged like spoiled milk, unfortunately. Not too late to change your group name if you need to, y'all. Ooh, those are fighting words, Liam. Okay, so you need practice. I just assigned you practice. I will assign you more practice. You're welcome. Next, you want examples. I will provide you with examples. They mostly are going to be 5 document examples, but all of the skills are the same in transfer. Still see them. You can still see them and see the skills being utilized. Shipping, I should be able to help you with that. We'll talk both about sourcing and grouping, especially in our. Now, we are down to only 37, so we lost about 15. It's fine, I'm not mad about it. But here is the thing that I am wondering. So I have some PowerPoints that deal with this stuff, and I can post them, and you can say, look through them on your own, or I could do another call, and really, like, I want to limit my insanity, but I kind of hate to wait 7 more days to do another call to give you more examples of DBQs if what we want is to discuss them. Does that make sense? So I could, screencast and go through some of the teaching you how to write good substructures for your DBQs. Like, I can either post that stuff or I can do a call over that stuff. So I'm going to put a question. What's that? Was there something left in it? I thought it was empty. Oh, are you going now? Yeah, sure. Okay, sorry, my bad. Mr. Krause was talking to me. Okay, so here is okay, so would you rather I do a how to and PowerPoint live? Thumbs up, yes, you are it live. Thumbs down, it doesn't make any difference. I can put it in Big Kid and you can read, and that's that. Ugh. What's with the devil? You just don't want to do any of it at all? What does the devil mean? I'm so confused. I'm too old for this. The devil is just posting? Well, what is it then? It's not a devil. It's a Japanese goblin. My bad. Right, I definitely should have known that. Right. Although I will say that reflection of my implicit biases of growing up in a Western culture, right? Like, does that make sense? How somebody who grew up in the States is way more likely to identify that as a devil than most anything else. Okay, so I will think about it. It looks like we are about 3-1 is the average that I am seeing there. Yay, I can reduce fractions. I'm so sorry. I've been doing lots of 7th grade math this week too, finding the volume of cylinders and fantastic. I mean, Baby Yoda's the best. All right, so I will for next Tuesday to talk about what is going on with my PowerPoint. I will probably post the PowerPoint and then and I will really try to keep it under. We do Thursday. Truth is desperate to get this information. Can we? Ms. Krause says, I'll think about a time. He says, can we do Thursday at 4? I'm trying to think if I have anything scheduled Thursday. I guess we can do Thursday. Okay, so. But you know that after this AP test is done, I'm gonna like ignore you guys, right? I mean, not ignore you as human beings, but like there's gonna be, we are smushing lots of instruction into a short amount of time, and after there is going to be less instruction. I do not blame you for hibernating. Okay, so I'm also going to post some review activities that were created by some other teachers to get you guys going in the review process. Here's what I will tell you about the way I usually do review. Olivia, the test got moved. You know, it's on the 21st. Everybody knows the test is now on the 21st. Okay, so right, you get a whole extra week of Mao Zedong pictures. He's hypothetically not even going to be on the exam because 1800. Well, I mean, fun fact, you've learned lots of 20th century stuff, so, you know. I'll screencast the history of the entire world, I guess, the day before. Maybe even the day of the exam. See, there's so much that's sad. Angela, I would strongly recommend that your brother not wear it ironically right now. I have a sickle and hammer shirt that my AP Euro class made me like 7 years ago. And I also wear it ironically, but really my places where it ironically are really, really, really limited because, well, also Russia is so much worse now than it was 7 years ago. But like the giant sickle and hammer and the writing in Cyrillic really kind of sends the wrong message. So like my best option is actually to wear it to work. Like I can't go for a run in the neighborhood wearing that, you know? Okay, so wrapping up, what am I saying? I can wear it around the house, right? Angela, are you suggesting he also wears the Obama one, ironically? I almost had words on a Facebook comment with my aunts because apparently some representative in the House said something to the effect of, when we have to choose between losing the American way of life or the possibility of losing American lives, we should always choose the latter. And she did not understand why CNN CNN, some commentary person was like, this guy's saying that Americans should die and we should reopen the economy. And I tried to explain to her that it's like a double negative and that the statement is pretty ambiguous. Because if you frame it as if the choice is the loss of the American way of life or the loss of American lives, we should always choose, like, does that mean that you should always choose life as in saving the sustaining it, or we should choose loss of life? And Hussein is spelled wrong. It's Hussein in this case. But anyhow, she was like, if anybody knows what the latter, it means the last thing you said, but like it's a clause. So are you just pulling out the noun, or is it the whole clause? That, you know, and she's like, I just don't understand how. And I was like, well, I mean, I think it is. I doubt that he meant that we should just let Americans die to save the economy, but like, I'm not really sure. Like, whoa, that doesn't really tell me. I feel like Obama's last name, I feel like his name is Obama. My daughter just said, look it up. I'm sure his last name is Obama. All right, so we will meet at 4 o'clock on Thursday. I'm going to post you some review stuff. Angela. I'm going to post some review stuff. Normally what I do for review is I don't actually give any review assignments whatsoever, and I just give review tests. So you are like forced to study if you want to. And I give tests and you don't want to fail them. Obviously, we are in a no testing zone, so that's exciting. So I'm going to go ahead and put up some assignments that should help you with that. And again, I encourage all of you to get in one of these 6 different groups and to do some studying and reviewing of each of the historical periods with them. I strongly suggest that you fish out your key concept outlines from all of your different units and actually carefully read them all and mark them up and circle things and highlight things. We will be having DBQs from different time periods, so you definitely want to be reviewing those different time periods. That's all I have for that. I do need to talk to the kids still who are still on the call. Does anybody have any questions before we say goodbye? No, we are question free. My ears. Several people are typing. Your group meetings are going to start this week. So my 10 o'clock Wednesday people, I will be talking to you for maybe an hour, hopefully a bit less, at 10 o'clock tomorrow. I do think that there's going to be something like that, Ella, the College Board. I don't think it's going to be available for another week or so, but there will be a chance where you can go in and you can look at how the interface is going to look, an idea of what it's going to be. All right, so if you do not have any more questions, you can go ahead and sign off. I do want the Achaemenid people to stay for just a couple of minutes. About that. You're so welcome. I really actually enjoy this, probably more than you. And Liam, yes, that is way better. That is more the length we're looking for inside out. Okay, so for anybody who's here still from the academy, you guys can keep meeting at 3 o'clock on Fridays. That is fine. But what I would strongly recommend that you do, I really just can't. I just can't with all of those things. What I would strongly recommend that you do, sorry, pulling up the spreadsheet right now, is, nope, that's not it. So, because there's a bunch of you who picked to be in that group. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there's 10 of you. If you guys were to join the Thursday at 12 group, that would put that group at sort of the maximum size, which is 15. And all of those other people are actually in your class for the red one. Most of you are there. So that would be a mostly red one group. Also, it looks like there's plenty of room for all of you to sign up. But if you all want to sign up into the Thursday at 12 group is the group where you can go and show up. So, I'm totally happy for you guys to use the Discord platform to work together and to study and to collaborate and to discuss stuff. But please come join one of those others, because this is a lot. This is honestly, I think, way more the vast majority of teachers are doing. And I'm happy to do it, but there's a limit to how much I can do and not have my family go, my children run maniacs or whatever.